Kudej. Welcome to our meeting this afternoon, and we're ready for your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I want to thank you, Justice Wiggins, and the members of the Commission for all the courtesies that you've given me the past couple of weeks. I've met personally with a number of you and have learned a lot from those meetings about the process that we're going through. It's a very humbling experience. But at the same time, it's been quite an adventure for me to cross the state and visit with a number of you. And I know it's an adventure because my GPS system keeps using the word recalculating as I'm trying to find you. While the papers in front of you tell you much about what I've done, they do not reveal much about me as a person. So I'd like to reflect for a moment as to me and my background. I firmly believe that I would not be here today but for my parents and the values that they taught me of God, family, and community. My father died a year ago. He was, like many of his generation, a World War II veteran. While his formal education ended when at the 8th grade level, he understood and taught his family the value of learning as an everyday experience. He was an avid reader. He was self-taught in a number of areas. He had the wisdom that comes with experience. I sought his counsel often. Dad worked hard on the farm and also for Winnebago industry, giving us opportunities. And I have 6 kids. He had 6 kids that he never had because of his education. At 83, my mother remains a woman of strong faith and has a strong sense of community. She volunteered on the ambulance service in my hometown and also worked in the food service industry or the food service department of the local hospital for many years. After she retired, she continued to work part-time as a home health aide until she was 70. Her commitment to community is unquestioned. My mom and dad were married for over 60 years. As role models, there were none better. Our family remains close, and as a result of Dad and Mom's influence, although it's tested at times when the Hawkeyes and Cyclones play. My wife Kim is here with me today, and hopefully my kids will be watching on the internet. Even though a number of people recommended that I try for the Supreme Court because of my experience and demeanor, without Kim's faith in me and her encouragement, I would not have applied. Except for the time spent in the military, I've spent my entire working career in the state of Iowa and have lived here my entire life. I've been an attorney for close to 37 years, handling cases in both state and federal courts in a variety of venues. I worked in Sioux City for 20 years. After law school, my first job was in a trust department in a local bank in Sioux City, where I worked on estate planning and also administered trusts and estates. I then went to the law firm of Shaw, Marshall, and Marks, where I had the good fortune of working with a number of excellent attorneys, including Charles Woolley, who, and Judge Woolley did serve on this court before he became a federal or a U.S. District Court judge. During my roughly 14 years in private practice, I learned that quality legal work was the way to attract and keep good clients. During these years, I was also involved with the legislative committee of the local Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Northwest Iowa Chamber Coalition. That is a collection of 14 different chambers in Northwest Iowa. As part of that process, I worked closely with the legislative director, Tom Rubel, and learned much about the legislative process and how laws are made, as well as the value of grassroots involvement in making those laws. I've been in public service for close to 22 years and have had the privilege to serve with a number of devoted public servants. U.S. Attorney Charles Larson Sr. convinced me in 1989 to leave private practice and join the U.S. Attorney's Office in Sioux City. When I left private practice, it was because I truly believed that public service was a higher calling. In 1994, then U.S. Attorney Stephen Rapp brought me over to Cedar Rapids to become chief of the Civil Division. It was being organized at that time. For 16 years, I served in management under a number of U.S. attorneys as chief of the Civil Division. As a result of that experience, I firmly believe that employees must be empowered to do their job and without being micromanaged, and that when tough decisions are being made that affect them, that it's good to have their input. I've also been an evaluator for over 10 years. I've either led or been a member of 22 different teams that went around the country to look at various U.S. attorneys' offices and evaluating the management structure of those offices. These contacts have given me a national perspective and a firm understanding that there are a variety of ways that one can manage an office successfully. I've also served as the ethics advisor for the office for many years, handling a variety of ethics questions. During my career, I've handled cases in state district courts throughout the northern half of the state of Iowa, and also before this court. I have cases pending in Plymouth County currently, so I know some of the pros and cons of electronic filing. I've also handled cases in U.S. district courts in Iowa and Minnesota, both the northern and southern district in Iowa, and I have also handled bankruptcy cases in the Northern District of Iowa, as well as 8th Circuit and 2nd Circuit Court of Appeals cases. As a result, I've dealt with electronic filing for a number of years, which could also be helpful as the court makes its transition to electronic filing. A great deal of personal satisfaction is derived from my work with the Department of Justice. I truly believe that working for the department is something more than just being a bureaucrat, and through my example, I've attempted to teach others that truly public service is something where we are there to serve and not to be served. I plan to stay in the Swisher area if appointed and continue to be involved in local and state bar associations. You will continue to see me working on bar committees as well as the Iowa State Bar Association booth at the State Fair, if possible, or we could even start our own if the Supreme Court would like to do that.
We tried, we didn't have the money.
We could share space with the Bar Association. I've been a Rotarian for over 35 years. Rotary's motto is service above self. Both Kim and I are multiple Paul Harris Fellows. You will continue to see Kim and I ringing bells for Salvation Army and doing other service projects as part of Rotary. I will continue to be involved in my church and hope to do caregiving as a Stephen minister. I will continue to help judge various moot court competitions at the Iowa Law School. Although a draining experience, I will continue to give blood and add to the gallons I have already given. See, Kim, I told you it'd work. I think it's important for judges to stay involved in their communities to the extent that they can. The Supreme Court broadly serves two roles, judicial and administrative. If picked as a justice, I will adhere to the law and impartially decide the cases that before me on the record to the best of my ability. While the Supreme Court faces many administrative challenges, I'm excited about being part of that process and open to the possibilities involving others in that process. If all goes as planned, my 83-year-old mother is watching us today on the computer. Clearly, technology is a big part of this court's future. The budget and the transition to electronic filing may be the biggest hurdles that the Supreme Court has. I firmly believe that my depth and variety of experience will be extremely helpful as we meet those administrative challenges and evaluate them for possible solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kudej. Do we have any questions from that side of the table? Mr. Pace?
Thank you. Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good afternoon, Mr. Kudej. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. I was trying to think of how to phrase this question, and I'll just do it and see how it comes out. I have had a number of cases with you over, I don't know, 20-some years now. Bankruptcy cases, litigation outside of bankruptcy. You were representing the SBA on a number of things having to do with the floods around Cedar Rapids and other things. And I guess what I would characterize your efforts over those years to be, in all of those cases, somehow across the board, you've been able to cut through the red tape of the federal government in connection with these very complex matters that you've been handling. I don't know how you're doing that. That doesn't happen with every U.S. attorney. I'm not that I'm critical of anybody else or any particular person. I just mean in the context of all the different agencies and all the things that are coming together in some of these cases, it's extremely difficult. How would you be able to, do you think you'd be able to kind of use that same skill of cutting through the red tape to maybe help figure out how to deliver legal services to the people of Iowa a little better?
Well, I would hope so. And I guess basically what I believe is the situation is you have to involve people, you have to really have one-on-one relationships with a lot of people so that you can get to the right folks. And in the case of the Supreme Court, I think that on the administrative side of things is probably where that's easier to do than where you're just on the judicial side of things. You can involve state court judges, you can involve court personnel, but beyond that, you can also involve citizens in the various communities across the state, as well as local politicians, representatives, and those kinds of folks. And basically, that's kind of the way I approach the federal government, is to get involved with the people, get to know the people, so that I'm just not a name or somebody on the phone, that I actually have a personal relationship with a lot of different people. And it's surprising what you can do when that is the case.
Thank you.
Professor Cochran?
Mr. Kudej, thanks for coming today. I have two things. First of all, to give you the opportunity to credit all of your professional and personal accomplishments to the decision to attend Loras College, which I think
No
is
doubt about it.
Yeah. The second is, as you mentioned, you've had the opportunity to appear in many courts, both state and federal, and so see a variety of judges. As an attorney who's appeared in these venues, what are the, I guess, the character traits or temperamental approaches that you think make a good judge, and how might you learn from those if you became one yourself?
Sure. I think the number one rule of being a judge is to listen to the people, give the people that are before you the opportunity to speak and to listen to them. I think that's the number one rule. I also believe that you have to be courteous. I've seen too many judges needlessly take after people that appear in front of them. That isn't the way I practice law, and that's not the way that I would act as a judge. I think you have to be prepared as you have arguments in front of you, so that I would never go into something cold, so that I understand the case that's being brought in front of me. I think it's really important to understand the facts of the case that are in front of you. Far too often I see appellate decisions where the facts are just wrong. And it's because that they don't take the time to really understand it, maybe don't ask the right questions. And unfortunately, they're usually my cases where it happens. So, but that's some of the things that I would be looking for. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
You didn't answer why I went to Loras, though. Any other questions?
It was cheaper than Notre Dame. Still is, yes.
Ms. Deneve?
Good afternoon.
Yes.
And I've asked this question before to other people, but strict constructionist, activist judge, those are the kind of the hotbeds right now that are being tossed around. What do you see as the role of the Supreme Court?
I see the role of the Supreme Court to follow the law. I don't believe in labels. I believe you judge the cases that come before you, and that you there's a process that you go through as you decide cases. If the case can be decided You decide the case at the lowest level you can. In other words, you don't look for reasons to go to the Constitution. You try to, if it's a motion for summary judgment, you decide it at that level. And so I don't look for, I wouldn't be looking for something where I'm trying to expand into areas. I would get great deference to cases that have been decided before. I'd give great deference to the statute itself. Hear the arguments before I would be acting. I just feel that that's important. I don't believe in being an activist judge, and I'm not sure what that means, quite honestly, but I just believe in following the law, and it served me well for 37 years.
Any other questions this way? How about the other way? Mr. Cook.
Sir, you've spent a considerable amount of your career working for the federal government. They, of course, print the money. This is a job you're applying for that's the state court, Supreme Court, facing very difficult budget challenges, extreme budget challenges. What skills do you have that would address that if you were selected to be on the court?
Sure. Well, it hasn't always been that we have printed the money. During the 16 years that I was a manager, oftentimes there were times when we had budget crisis. In fact, I can remember a time where we had some people that we had to let that couldn't work for a while, or we couldn't fill positions, or those kinds of things. It's tough. In fact, we're going through lean years right now because we just got the memo this morning that we have to restrict our travel with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I think, from my standpoint, you have to first understand what it is that you have to work with, and understand the budget amount. I think if you're going to go to the legislature for money, it takes more than just walking over and talking to their leadership. I think you really have to have a plan of action as far as getting money out of the legislature. And I think it involves probably starting at the grassroots level and working its way up in a lot of different ways, because if you can convince local legislators that there are benefits derived from having that district court staffed and those kinds of things, it's perhaps something where you can go to the legislature and earmark some projects or some things like that, or perhaps there are other places that you can get. But the bottom line is, if you only have X amount of dollars to work with, you're going to have some hard decisions to make. And my feeling is, and it goes back to the statement that I have, that if you not only just from on high make those decisions, but also go down to the people that are affecting them and get from them ideas on how to best cut costs and deliver services, you can oftentimes get some ideas that you never hear from other people, because they are the people that are impacted by that.
Thank you.
Mr. Brody?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Short of this morning, as you're preparing your remarks or your jokes, when was the last time you were criticized or challenged in an approach that you wanted to take on a case or an issue? And how did you handle that? Do you have a good example of your work ethic around challenging circumstances?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind right off the top of my head, and it's not the last time, but it's the one that comes to mind, okay, is out in western Iowa when I was in Sioux City. They wanted to put one of the Native American tribes out there wanted to put a casino in. And the casino, the land actually came across the river, but was landlocked because the county had closed all the roads that were part of that. And so it caused quite a stir at that time. And we met with the local community, we met with the county attorney, we tried to iron out those things. That we were being criticized pretty heavily for the fact that we were trying to put this we had a bunch of farmers and a lot of other folks that were upset about that. And so we just met with them, we met with the tribe, we tried to bring the parties together to take care of some of those concerns. And so that usually is the approach that I try to take, is to visit with people and try to get that taken care of.
Mr. Holm?